Zebedee had gathered together an orchestra, and the concert was about to begin. "Follow me closely," he said, hopefully, and they all said they would. "We are poised," said Brian. Ermintrude was worried. Am I doing it right, darlings?" "No, you're jolly well not," said Brian. "I thought not." May we try again?" said Zebedee. Oh, silly old me. It was never like this in the Halle. Get your hooves out of it. "No need to be like that," said Ermintrude. And Zebedee restarted. "All together now," he said. "No, ma'am," said Dillon. "Follow the beat. Please." Ermintrude promised to try harder and apologized for holding them up. "Fun, though," she said. Zebedee, undaunted, tried again. "Hey, I've just noticed. It's a long way down, isn't it?" "Just play," said Dillon. "I'm stuck." "Oh, ma'am," said Dillon. "I don't think Brian's very happy," said Florence. "I'm stuck on a harp." "Well, you would choose the harp, wouldn't you?" "Great oaf." "I think you're rotten." Ermintrude was all for carrying on without the harp. So Zebedee said they'd better. "Ignore all harp cues," he said. "And drum cues," said Ermintrude. "How humiliating," said Dougal. Florence thought they should get on, and so did Dillon. Ermintrude was prepared to give her all. "I'm still stuck." "Oh, what is the point of it all?" said Dougal. "Come on, kitten on the keys," he said, which made Ermintrude very cross. "Get off," said Dougal. "Cheeky thing." Zebedee had one last try. Brian solved his particular problem. "I'm unstuck," he said, "and lovely with it." "I think a lullaby to finish with," sighed Zebedee, "as it's time for bed." Dougal was worried about his eyes and was testing out a new pair of glasses. "You know, I really think I can see better with these. Much better." Oops, takes a bit of getting used to. That's better. Now, Now, long vision perfect. Now, what about close-ups? Let's see. Dougal's Japes by William Shakespeare. You know, I didn't know he'd written that. Now, visual identification test. Flowers, yes. Very good. Now, what's the time? 10 to 10, yes. You know, I couldn't see that clock just now. These glasses are marvellous. Now, a little drink. Now, what's that? Picture of me? I've never seen that before. Just think what I've been missing without glasses. It's a chastening thought. A chastening thought. Chastening. Florence arrived. "Hello, Dougal," she said. "What have you got glasses on for?" "Because I'm going deaf," said Dougal sarcastically. Oh, I see," said Florence. "Really?" said Dougal. "May I have a sit in your chair?" said Florence. "Be my guest." "Dougal, I really would like to know why you've got those glasses on," said Florence. "Isn't it obvious?" said Dougal. "We are none of us getting any younger. Even the keen-eyed and ever-watchful dog begins to need an artificial aid or two." "Oh, dear." "But, Dougal," said Florence. No, please, don't interrupt," said Dougal. "I don't wear them for pleasure, you know." "But, Dougal..." "Now, please, don't try to be kind. I know what you're thinking. Poor old thing. He's past it. That's what you're thinking." "I'm thinking no such thing," said Florence. "If you'd just let me explain." "Explain? Explain? Oh, I know what you will explain. You will explain that your friend is still your friend, even though he was growing old and grey and useless." "Dougal, I think you're getting rather maudlin," said Florence. "And all I wanted to say was..." Stop! Think of all the famous people who had to wear glasses. Napoleon? Julius Caesar? I didn't know Julius Caesar wore glasses," said Florence. "Ignorant thing," said Dougal. "And then there was Genghis Khan and my Auntie Meggsy. One learns something new every day," said Florence. "Yes, one does if one listens to little old historical me," said Dougal. "But we are straying a little from the point, I think." Yes, we are," said Florence, "because..." "Now, you're going to say I look ridiculous," said Dougal. I know, but I shall have to learn to live with it, like Shakespeare." "What can I say?" thought Florence. "I'll be bumping into things soon," said Dougal heavily. "Dougal, you haven't got your glasses on," said Florence very quickly. What do you mean, haven't got them on? What do you mean, haven't got my glasses on? What do you mean?" "They're sitting on top of your head," said Florence. "Why didn't you tell me?" said Dougal, "instead of letting me wander around making a fool of myself?" "I tried," said Florence. "Pooh," said Zebedee. "I like your hat," he said to Dougal, "but it's time for bed." "Good night," said Florence. Dougal was a bit put out by it all. "Good night, Dougal." "Yes, it's all right for some. They haven't gone around looking foolish all day. I've gone blind." Florence found Mr. Rusty in what he called a bit of a state. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Well, I'll tell you if you don't go too far away," said Mr. Rusty. "It's the television." "Oh?" "Yes, they've lost their announcer. It's very careless of them, but they do come and go, you know." Zebedee arrived. "What's going on?" he said. "Trouble on the telly? Hector's house on fire? Baba gone home to Africa? Dougal doing the weather forecast? Worse than that," said Mr. Rusty. "We've got to find an announcer," said Florence, "or no one will know what's going on." So they set out to find an announcer. "Me," said Brian. "How about me, ma'am?" said Dylan. Me? We'll have auditions, said Florence, then everyone can try. Look, I don't like to seem pushy, said Dougal, but Robert Dougal is a friend of mine. But Zebedee thought that friends in high places was an unfair advantage, and everyone should have an equal chance. Choose something to announce and announce it, he said. Ladies first. Drink more milk, said Ermintrude. Support your local cow. Thank you, darlings. She looks as though she could do with a bit of support, said Dougal. The weather forecast is as follows. If I lie down, it'll rain. If I stand up, it'll snow. And if I don't do anything at all, you have to count 3 and run. Thank you. Was I lovely? Very good, said Florence. Zebedee said it was Dylan's turn next. Pardon me, ma'am. Thank you. Children, fellow citizens, fellow dogs, allow me to say a few words about flower power. As you know, I am a virtuoso on the guitar, and if I can remember a song, I'll play it for you. Dylan? Yes, ma'am. I shall go and put on my spotted bow tie. Brian was next. I should like to give you a short talk on the behaviour and loveliness of the common or garden snail. Anyone got a pair of steps? Dylan laughed. And so did Dougal. Yeah, I think you're all rotten, said Brian. And Zebedee said perhaps Dougal should have a try. Who, me? Me? Oh, yes. Yes. Fluent, said Brian. Dougal had to have a piece of sugar to calm his nerves. And Florence asked him what he was going to announce. I'm thinking, said Dougal. My brain is at fever pitch. We're all agog, said Florence, looking at the Radio Times. And Dougal did his celebrated imitation of a dog eating sugar. Zebedee asked Florence whether she would like to audition. Oh, no, said Florence. Coward, said Dougal. Have a go, said Brian. Well, said Florence, all right. Everyone was delighted, except Florence. The setter waits, said Zebedee. Get to it. Don't be nervous, said Dougal. Friends, said Florence. Viewers, she said. Time for bed, she said. Florence called to Zebedee, who arrived. Oh, there you are, said Florence. Yes, here I am, said Zebedee. Shall we go? Why not, said Florence. In the garden, the train seemed very agitated. My dear, she said, puffing away like anything. The game's on we've had here. I can hardly get my breath back. And she told Florence a gang had appeared and broken everything and then had run away, making a lot of noise. It left me all of a tremble, I can tell you, said the train, trembling. Gracious, said Florence. You can say that again, said the train. Gracious, said Florence. Florence untied Ermintrude. Gracious, said Florence again. Thank you, dear heart, said Ermintrude. The trouble we've had here today. Rustlers, you know. Wicked things who like stealing cows. Gracious. But help was at hand.
Now, what seems to be the trouble here?
Said Dougal. Rustlers, my dear, said Ermintrude. I've been molested. Tied up, said Florence. Hoof and foot, said Ermintrude. It won't do.
Well, now, which way did the ornery coyotes go?
The what? Said Florence.
The,
I never keep this up. Oh, I'll get a sore throat. Well, what are you going to do? Said Ermintrude, with some heat. Do? Said Dougal. Well, how many were there? Hundreds, said Florence. Hundreds? Well, in that case, I'm handing in my badge. I'm not daft. Catch me rounding up 100 desperate criminals. Were they armed? Yes, 2 each. No, I mean, did they have guns and knives and things? I don't know. Yes, they did. Well, in that case, I think I'll pop home and put the kettle on. Stay around here. You never know who you might meet. Do you? Hello, all, said Brian, arriving. I hear you've been having a little trouble. Is that right? Nothing like the trouble we've got now you've arrived, said Dougal. Now, don't be like that, said Brian. I can be a great help in time of stress. I've had a lot of experience. With rustlers, he's off his head. He wouldn't know a rustler if it fell on him. Oh, you pathetic little clump. Leave this to the expert, namely me, who single-pawed outwitted the shepherd's bush mob, the ones that set fire to Hector's house. I'll get 'em. Go get him, Sheriff! No, don't rush me, boy. Don't rush me, boy. Oh, run for your lives, it's a lion! London's burning, the dam's burst, women and dogs first! Now, Dougal, don't get confused. And Ermintrude laughed like anything. If there's one thing I hate, said Dougal slowly. Yes, said Florence. It's silly jokers, said Dougal. Now, I can take a joke. I can take a joke with the best. But there are jokes and jokes. Florence asked Mr. Rusty if he'd seen Zebedee, and Mr. Rusty said he hadn't, not for some time. So Florence called and waited and wondered, because it wasn't like Zebedee to be late when he said he'd be early. Stuck in the traffic, said Mr. Rusty. What traffic, said Florence, which made Mr. Rusty think. But before he could decide, Zebedee arrived. Sorry to be late, he said. Get stuck in the traffic, said Mr. Rusty. And then he realized he'd missed hearing something, but he couldn't think what. Did you notice anything, said Zebedee. Like not hearing something you usually hear, for instance? Oh, yes, said Florence. No boing. Exactly, said Zebedee. I'm using my spare spring, and it doesn't boing. Then we must do something about it, said Florence. Have you seen a spring, Dougal? She asked. Have I seen a what? Said Dougal. A spring, said Florence. Surely you mean the spring, said Dougal. Or the summer, or the autumn. Oh, no, you misunderstand me, said Florence. I mean Zebedee's spring. He's lost it, and I'm looking for it. Lost it? I thought he was attached to it, said Dougal. Look, why are you going the other way? He said peevishly. But Florence didn't listen. She was too busy looking for Zebedee's spring. Good morning, Ermintrude. Good morning, dear heart. Have you seen a spring? Spring? Oh, what a lovely time. The flowers that bloom in the spring, tra-la. Goodbye, Ermintrude, said Florence. She's never been the same since she did all that moon jumping, said Dougal. Oh, was that her? Said Florence. Dylan was asleep. don't bother, said Dougal. He wouldn't know a spring from a hole in the ground. I would too, said Dillon, to their utter amazement. A spring makes a noise and a hole in the ground keeps silent. It's a natural law, ma'am. Well, having sorted out that little problem, perhaps we can get on, said Dougal tartly. Furthermore, a spring, said Dillon, goes like this, said Florence. Yes, we know. Thank you. When you've quite finished pirouetting, said Dougal. Oh, Dougal, said Florence. Come on, Pavlova. Oh, Dougal, said Florence. Crazy, said Dillon, like, crazy. Now, who else can we ask, said Florence. I can think of someone, said Dougal, darkly. Boing, 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 boing. I might have known, said Dougal. I might have known. I like it, I like it. Now that's naughty, Brian, said Florence. I am setting, said Brian, a new trend in snail behaviour. Boing, boing. Florence was infected. But Dougal was disgusted. I refuse to notice what's going on, he said. Spoil sport, said Florence. Spoil sport, said Dougal. You wait till I get you home. I like it, I like it. Oh well. Zebedee arrived and learnt the awful truth. I'm afraid your spring's a bit bent, said Florence, giggling. This is no laughing matter, said Zebedee. Luckily, I'm able to put it right, and I suggest it's time for bed. The boy stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled. Soppy thing. What did you say? Said Florence. Oh, nothing, said Mr. Rusty. Guess what I've got here, said Florence. Give up, said Florence. Yes, I'll give up, said Mr. Rusty. It's a pie. Pie, said Zebedee. I made it myself, said Florence. It just needs cooking. Well, you better go and cook it then, said Zebedee. Maison Dougal at your service, said Dougal. What's your pleasure? I want to cook my pie, said Florence, in your stove. Pie, said Dougal. Pie, said Florence. That's a pie, said Dougal. Looks more like a tart to me. I don't know what you mean, said Florence. Well, why do you want to use my stove, said Dougal. It's pretty, said Florence. How feminine, murmured Mr. Rusty. What sort of pie, said Dougal. Not sure, said Florence. You're not sure, said Dougal. You come in here, shove a pie in the oven, and then say you're not sure? What would Fanny say? Fanny who? Said Florence. I may faint. Now don't fuss, Dougal. That's very wise, said Mr. Rusty. My old granny used to say pies should never be fussed. Quite right, said Florence. So they left the pie to cook and went for a walk, which was a mistake. Oh, what does my little nose detect? A pie? Oh, doing a lot of bubbling. I better make sure it doesn't take off. And Brian put a stone on the pie to hold it down. Dillon also noticed something. What's that like, rare smell? He said. Am I dreaming? No? I think I'd better, investigate this. He went to the stove. That pie looks ready to, eat. Dillon had a fight with his conscience, and his conscience finally won. Ermintrude came along. What's this then? A pie? What's more, an unattended pie? People are very careless. Someone could quite easily eat that. Just as well I'm so honest. But what if it doesn't belong to anyone? Be a pity to waste it. I'll just add my secret ingredient and come back and eat that later. Dougal, too, was thinking about the pie, so he just added a little something for luck. Zebedee wondered where everyone was. What's cooking, he thought. They all came back in the direction of the pie. Gracious, said Florence. I'm very disappointed, said Ermintrude. It's not every day you find a pie and then discover it belongs to someone else. And I added my secret ingredient, too. Bear up, said Brian. Florence gave what she thought was a piece of the pie to Dougal. It was Brian's stone. My mum's pastry was tough, but this is ridiculous. The pie didn't seem to be a great success. Like tough. Like yours, said Brian. Watch it, said Dougal. I think we've had a failure, said Mr. Rusty. And they were all forced to agree. Well, you can't win 'em all, said Zebedee. Time for bed. Hello, said Mr. Rusty. Hello, said Florence. Just giving the old barrel a turn, said Mr. Rusty. Yes, I heard it, said Florence. Zebedee arrived. Shall we go? Said Florence. Why not? Said Zebedee. Yes, why not? Said Florence. In the garden, she looked for Dougal, who was looking for her, somewhat agitatedly. Ah, there you are. Oh, I'm very glad to see you. I can't tell you how glad I am to see you. Why? Said Florence. Oh, I wish you hadn't asked me that, said Dougal, because I don't know how to break it to you. I know you're very fond of her. Who? Said Florence. Who? Oh, I don't think I should tell you, you know. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Now who, Dougal? Ermintrude. I'm afraid she's been affected by all those poppies she's been eating. Poppies? Said Florence. Well, it's either that or the pansies. I don't know which is worse. But whatever it is, the poor old thing's in a very bad way. I think her moon-jumping days are over anyway, if she ever did it, which I doubt. It's always seemed a very unlikely story to me. Very unlikely. Dougal, said Florence, will you kindly tell me what this is all about? All right, said Dougal. That cow is flying a kite. Kite, said Florence. A kite, said Dougal. C-I-T-E, kite. She is flying a kite. How lovely, said Florence. Lovely, said Dougal. It's unnatural. Cows don't fly kites. Cows eat grass and do a lot of mooing and lying about in fields and things of that nature. Well, perhaps she felt like a change, said Florence. That's hardly a reason to fly a kite, said Dougal. I've brought you a few flowers to nibble, said Dougal, kindly. Bless you, dear boy, said Ermintrude. What you doing? Said Dougal. I'm flying my kite, said Ermintrude. Very relaxing. Would you like to have a try? That's very kind of you, said Dougal. Well, hold on tight, said Ermintrude, with reason. What? 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 Help! 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 It's a very good kite, said Ermintrude. I do hope he doesn't lose it. I hope we don't lose Dougal, said Florence. Oh, don't worry, dear thing, said Ermintrude. He'll come down to earth, eventually. Florence rushed to the scene. All right, Dougal, she said. You cannot imagine, said Dougal, how infuriating a question like that can be when you've just been up in a kite and crashed.
Mr. Rusty met Florence at the roundabout and told her if she went to the garden to look out for a carpet. About this big, he said, and very, very special. Oh, said Florence. Zebedee arrived. All ready to go? He asked. Ready, said Florence. Come on then, said Zebedee. All right, said Florence. Dougal! Oh, somebody coming, thought Dougal. Now, who can it be? Dougal! Uh-oh, Miss Pert, watch it. Hello, Dougal, said Florence. Hello, said Dougal. How nice of you to come and see me. Lovely day. I think it might rain. Hadn't you better go home? You'll get soaked. You'll get very wet. Oh, your hair will be all draggly. You'll look awful. Dougal, it's a lovely day, said Florence. Yes, but the forecast's very bad. Typhoons, I think they said, with snow and fog and all that. No, what? Get up, quiet, you fool, quiet. Oh, I feel like a sausage roll. What's happening? Said Brian. I think Dougal's got a flying carpet, said Florence. Oh, the things I let myself in for. Come in, number 3, your time is up. Oh dear. Come back, Dougal. I think he's in orbit, said Brian. Oh, put me down, you demented axemisser, you. Dougal, that was very good, said Florence. I feel slightly sick, said Dougal. What made it do that? Magic? Oh, just a carpet. I'm not so sure, Dougal, said Florence. Watch. Good gracious, said Dougal. It eats sugar. A cannibal carpet. We'll all be chewed up in its warp and weft. You see. Can I have a go? Said Brian. But the carpet disappeared. Just our luck, said Dougal. It doesn't like snails. Typical.
Mr. Rusty was worried about his chimney. It needed sweeping. He told Zebedee. Sweep it then, said Zebedee. Yes, well, easier said than done in this day and age, said Mr. Rusty. You don't see a lot of chimney sweeps about for some reason, do you? Zebedee went to have a look. You're right, he said, and Mr. Rusty had to laugh. You look a proper caution, he said. A proper caution. And he laughed like a bucket. Don't fall off, said Zebedee coldly, trying to be dignified. Oh, I'm sorry, said Mr. Rusty. It's just that you looked a proper caution, said Zebedee, slowly. Exactly, said Mr. Rusty. And then they thought about the best way to get the chimney swept, without the sweeper being a proper caution. Florence met Dougal in the garden. What have you got there? She asked. It's my patent chimney sweeping device. Oh, I see, said Florence, going for a little walk. It's extremely clever and simple, said Dougal. Bit like me, really. What do you call it? Said Florence. The hedgehog, said Dougal. And what are you going to do with it? Sweep chimneys, said Dougal. Oh, yes, said Florence. What am I going to do with it, really? Muttered Dougal. You're muttering, Dougal, said Florence. They arrived. Now, where's that snail? I told him to be early. Never trust a mollusk. But Brian was on his way. Here I am, old fat friend, he said. Watch it, said Dougal, and come on. Florence wondered how it was all going to work. Won't work, said Brian. Of course it will, said Mr. McHenry. Florence started things off. Now, who's going up? She said. They all blenched, especially Dougal. Well, someone's got to go, said Florence, but no one seemed very keen. Shall I go? She said. Why not? Said Dougal. Oh, said Florence, and thought about it. Dogs climb ladders, said Mr. McHenry. Go on, Dougal, said Florence. No, said Dougal, so loudly they all jumped. Oh, well, said Florence. I think it's a job for a human being, said Brian. It's a two-legged job, and I haven't even got one. It's a well-known fact. Snails are legless. Mr. McHenry finally volunteered and went up on the roof with Dougal's chimney sweeper. Careful. Could someone go inside and tell me if anything's happening? Said Mr. McHenry. Nothing startling as yet, said Brian, peering. Mr. McHenry worked away, to some effect. And then, unfortunately, he dropped the sweeper, with unfortunate results. Oh, was ever a snail so put upon? And Brian went home in a snaily huff. What? Florence giggled when she shouldn't have. What's going on? Said Zebedee. I thought you were sweeping chimneys. And he went to investigate. Good night, sighed Florence. Did I do it right? Said Mr. McHenry. Well, not quite, said Florence. Mr. Rusty was still worried about his chimneys. I'm worried about my chimneys, he said. They'll have to wait, said Florence. Don't forget to wash before bed, said Zebedee. How much longer? Said Dougal. I've got a crick in my neck. My left front foot's gone to sleep and my nerves are jangling. Absolutely jangling. Nearly finished, man. Have you caught the essential me? For Dylan was making a sculpture of Dougal. I wouldn't want anyone to see it before it's finished. Do you think that notice will keep them away? Asked Dougal. Meanwhile, Florence and Mr. Rusty were talking. What do you think of the international situation? Said Florence. I try not to, said Mr. Rusty. Very wise, said Florence. I wonder where Zebedee is. And they called him. And he arrived. There's something creative going on in the garden, he said. Oh, said Florence. Oh, said Ermintrude. I can't begin to tell you what's going on here. Try, said Florence. Have a guess, said Ermintrude. Go on. You've jumped over the moon, said Mr. Rusty. Silly thing, said Ermintrude. I don't do that anymore. And she went to see how Dougal's sculpture was coming on. Please, ma'am, said Dillon. It's not finished yet. We'll let you know, said Dougal. Oh, it's not finished yet, and they're going to let us know, said Ermintrude. Oh, the excitement of it all. Tra-la, tra-la. What? Said Florence. Secret? Dillon carried on working. 7 inches? Wow. What do you mean, wow? It's just like I have to rethink the nose, man. It's 7 inches across. Like, wow. That is an epic nose. Wow. Wow. It's nothing. Hello, hello, said Brian, much to Dillon's fury. He had to have silence while he was working, he said. So zip your screamer, said Dougal, rather coarsely. Oh, said Brian. Did you hear that? The train arrived. Dillon was in despair. Anyone want to go anywhere? Said the train. I just want silence, said Dillon, slightly hysterically. You've upset him now, said Dougal. Well, I don't know, I'm sure, said the train. Open your mouth and you get your funnel bitten off. It wasn't like this in the sidings at Clapham, I can tell you. And she left. I have never known anything like it in all my puff, she said. Ah! Sorry, said Mr. McHenry. And Dillon said he really didn't know what he was doing anymore. No, it doesn't look like it, said Dougal. Hello all, said Mr. McHenry. Dillon lost control. He's lost control. Who's not to be disturbed, said Mr. Rusty. I can't go on, said Dillon. I can't. Something went on.
I've something to say,
said the clay statue.
It's like, time for bed. Babies.
When Florence arrived, Mr. Rusty said he had a splendid idea. Oh, what is it? Said Florence. Hide and seek, said Mr. Rusty. Zebedee arrived. Hide and seek, he said. Yes, said Mr. Rusty, all of us. All of us, said Florence. I see, all of us, said Zebedee. So they all went. In the garden, everyone was excited about the game of hide and seek, especially Brian. But who was hiding and who was seeking? Well, I'm hiding, said Dougal. Well, I prefer to hide, said Mr. Rusty, and Florence, and Mr. McHenry, and Dillon. We know who that leaves, said Dougal. Zebedee arrived. Have you decided who's it? He asked. Yes, they said. Brian, said Dillon. Snails are great at seeking, ma'am. They are well known for it. Now, just a minute, said Brian. Just a minute. All decided, said Dougal. Everyone hide. So everyone went to hide. Right, you lot, said Brian. Hide, because I shall be at you like a lynx. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Coming! Like a lynx. 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 Here I come, said Brian. Like a lynx, we know. None of the others had been found, not even Mr. Rusty or Mr. McHenry, who were both fairly visible. No one would be daft enough to hide in there, said Brian. Watch it. Dylan and Florence and Mr. Rusty and Zebedee hid on while Brian sought. Not very good at it, is he? Said Mr. Rusty, and was caught immediately. Dougal began to get the impression that he was being toyed with. And Mr. McHenry discovered that hiding behind his motorbike didn't work. Dougal found Zebedee just before Brian did, and Florence gave herself up. Where's Lynx Eye? Said Dougal. But Zebedee decided it was time for everyone to go to bed. Thank you, Brian, said Florence. Good night. Good night, said Mr. Rusty. All exhausted, I suppose. Florence asked Mr. Rusty if Zebedee had arrived yet, and Mr. Rusty said he hadn't. Oh, said Florence. And Zebedee arrived. I hear tales of cooking in the garden, he said. Now, let me see. Have I got everything? Oh, dear, people come to plague me. We haven't come to plague you, they said. We're spectators, they said. Oh, joy, said Dougal heavily. What you making, old cooker? Said Brian. Pancakes, said Dougal. You're lovely, said Brian. Florence read the recipe. What next? Said Dougal. Milk? Said Florence. Ah, well, yes. Well, I am waiting for the milk, aren't I? Said Dougal. About time, said Dougal. Herbs? Said Florence. Yes, I'm waiting for those too, said Dougal. The herbs arrived. Here we are, said Mr. McHenry. Essence of herb, straight from the garden. Well, perhaps I can get on now, said Dougal. Yes, I think you probably can, said Florence. And Dylan said he'd play some pancake music to help things along. Dylan dropped off, but the pancake making went on. Dylan, refreshed, played on. When are we going to, eat, man? Said Dylan. Oh, I love a pancake, said Ermintrude. Florence cooked the first pancake. Now, careful, said Mr. Rusty. Don't burn yourself. Now, toss your pancake in the air. That's the right way. So Florence tossed the pancake. Bravo, said Ermintrude. My turn, said Dougal. But Dylan got there first. Suits you, Snail, said Dougal, giggling. I'm a failure, man, said Dylan. Yes, you are, said Brian. Hit me right on the bonce. Are you implying my pancakes are heavy? Said Dougal. I make the lightest pancakes in the world. I'll have you know, in the trade, they are known as Dougal's Delights. What shall we do today? Said Florence. Well, I've had a thought, said Zebedee. Tell me, said Florence. I want a photograph, said Zebedee. What of? Said Florence, or rather, who of? Everyone, said Zebedee. I want it for my album, just in case. In case of what? But Zebedee didn't answer. Zebedee wants a photograph. Of me? Said Dougal. Of everyone, said Florence. Oddly enough, Dougal had his camera with him. Why, Dougal, you've got your camera with you, said Florence. Hello, 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 said Brian. Hey, hold it right there, Snail. I have a little job for you. Oh, ecstasy! Oh, bliss! We'll have less of the heavy sarcasm and more attention to what I say, said Dougal. Please. Florence told Mr. Rusty about the photograph, and Mr. Rusty said he thought it was a good idea. Just in case. Dylan wondered where everyone was. It was so peaceful. Not for long, said Ermintrude. Meanwhile, back at the camera, Florence and Mr. Rusty were also wondering where everyone was. So they went to look. Well, I'm here, said Dougal. Yes, but you're not exactly everyone, are you? Said Mr. Rusty. And Zebedee wanted everyone, in case. In case of what? Said Dougal. Is he worried he's not going to see us again? Or something? I don't know, said Florence. Well, I think it's very sinister, said Dougal. I'm all ready, said Brian. But Mr. Rusty said they should try to get everyone. Zebedee wanted a photograph of everyone. I wonder why, said Florence, worried. Well, perhaps they're writing him out of the series, said Dougal. Like they do, if you're not careful. I've been ready for hours, said Brian. We'll take one, said Mr. Rusty, just in case. So get snapping, mollusk. And mind you get me right profile. The others are here, said Florence. Where have you been? Said Dougal. We've been waiting for days. All right, then. Everyone in position, please. Positions, said Brian. Where's the birdie, Dougal? Where's the what? Said Dougal. No good without the birdie. I don't believe it, said Dougal. Whatever next? Wait till I tell Tony. Birdies indeed. Watch the birdie? What? Said Dougal. What did you say? What? 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 There's no need to snap. I only said, watch the birdie. Got to have a birdie, said Mr. Rusty. No good without a birdie. No good at all. It's a well-known fact. And it's also a well-known fact, said Dougal, that if we don't take this picture soon, we'll be part of the news headlines. Oh, I'm sure they'll wait for us, Dougal, said Florence. I'll be a birdie, said Brian. But there was no need for this sacrifice. Watch me, said the birdie. Oh, it's flown away, said Mr. Rusty. Now there won't be any photograph, and posterity will forget we ever existed. Sic transit gloria mundi. I may cry, said Brian.
Yes. Oh, I'm diabolically clever. Now, is everything ready? Yes. Then let the experiment begin. I need a victim.
Oh, you've knocked my hat off, said Brian. You're bald, said Dougal. Yes, like all snails, said Brian. Well, I have some great news for you, said Dougal, evilly. Great news. Really? Said Brian. Oh, you're going to be so pleased, said Dougal. Brian wasn't too sure. It won't hurt, said Dougal. So Brian submitted to Dougal's experiment. No, have I got it right? Muttered Dougal. Hey, don't say that, said Brian. My head feels very funny. Oh dear, said Dougal. I think the mixture was a bit strong. Hey, who's put the light out? Squeaked Brian. Now, I don't want you to panic, said Dougal. You don't want me to what? Said Brian, panicking. Florence arrived. Help, said Brian. Who are you? Said Florence. Brian, shrieked Brian. I've been got at. Yes, you have, said Florence, trying not to laugh. I didn't recognize you without your hat. And she got it and put it on for Brian. Thank you, said Brian. Ermintrude arrived at Dougal's experimental establishment. You don't happen to have a pair of scissors about you by any chance? Asked Brian. Good heavens, a woolly caterpillar. I'm not a woolly caterpillar. Aren't you, dear? No, I'm Brian. Ermintrude thought. You know, I've always fancied myself with hair. This is going to be tricky. Hurry, dear. Hurry? You can't hurry science. If you want hair, you'll have to be patient. As you say, dear. Now, let me see. Yes, she should be about done. Let's have a look. Ermintrude was revealed in all her glory. And Dougal decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Want some sugar, Dougal? Said Florence. I'm not Dougal, I'm Ermintrude, said Ermintrude, rather proudly. Florence called Zebedee, who arrived. Look, said Florence. Do something. Zebedee examined the evidence. I see, he muttered. Brian and Ermintrude met. Can't see your face, dear thing. Allow me. I think I might be in a spot of bother, muttered Dougal. What do you mean by it? Said Zebedee sternly. And he poured some of his special mixture on Dougal's head. No, I'm hearing enough. Stop it. No, get off. That'll teach him, said Zebedee. Dougal tried hard to rub the mixture off on some leaves, but it was no good. Oh, dear. Zebedee sprayed Brian and Ermintrude with his mixture, and they were back to normal. Dougal wasn't. How humiliating, he said. Oh, I feel like a rabbit. And he went back to his laboratory for some of his own medicine. Would you like a piece of sugar, Dougal? Said Florence. I could do with something, said Dougal. It's been a harrowing day. Oh, your hair. Shouldn't it be a little longer?
Dougal and Florence were up rather late one day, and wondering where all the stars had gone. "Do you think it's cloudy?" said Florence. "Well, that would be the simple explanation," said Dougal. "What do you mean?" said Florence. "Well, you never know in this place, do you? I expect someone switched them off." "Oh, can you do that?" said Florence. "Can you do it? Of course you can do it." "Oh, I didn't know," said Florence. "The ignorance," said Dougal. "Now, I didn't come here to be insulted," said Florence. "Hoity-toity," said Dougal. "And anyway, I'm not at all sure you're right," said Florence. "Have you ever known me to be wrong?" said Dougal. Florence looked at him. "Well, I mean about basic, well-known things like stars," said Dougal. I may have made little errors in the past about minor matters. Well, I'm only human, you know." "But you're not human," said Florence. Well, if you're going to get personal," said Dougal, "you can go and look at the stars with someone else. I shan't care." And he got all huffy. "Now, there's no need to get huffy," said Florence. "Who's huffy?" said Dougal. "I'm never huffy." "I only said you weren't human," said Florence, "and you get huffy." "I thought we came to look at the stars," said Dougal, huffily. So they counted the stars, which had come out during the argument, and found there was still quite a lot missing. "Yes, quite a lot missing," said Dougal darkly. "Someone has been tampering." So they counted them again. "I make it one short now," said Dougal. "I wonder where it is," said Florence. Dylan arrived. "I've found the craziest thing over there," he said. "Over where?" said Dougal. "Over where? "Why, over there, man," said Dylan. "Craziest thing you ever saw." "I presume eventually he'll tell us what it is," said Dougal. But Dylan said he'd show them what it was. And it was the missing star, come down into the garden for a change of scene. It's a bit dark here, isn't it?" said the star sweetly. "Well, what do you expect?" said Dougal. "You're supposed to be up there shining away." "On strike, I suppose." "It's very pretty," said Florence. "Thank you," said the star. "You may call me Estelle." "Estelle?" said Florence. "Well, it should be Stella, but I changed it, because I think Estelle is much more suitable these days, don't you? Any star who is anyone is called Estelle." "I don't know what this garden's coming to," said Dougal. "I really don't." "Oh, you," said Florence. "Listen." Oh, I feel like lighting up," said the star. "Back to work, I hope," said Dougal. "Oh, I wish I was a star," said Florence, sighing. Mr. Rusty had written a letter to the local council, protesting about road conditions in the garden, and Florence agreed the traffic was getting heavier. Zebedee asked what the trouble was. "I'm campaigning for a green belt," said Mr. Rusty. "I'm sure you'll look very pretty," said Zebedee. "Shall we go?" In the garden, others were campaigning about a variety of things. And everyone, including Dillon, was busy preparing signs prohibiting or advocating or demanding various things for various needs. Even the birds. And Penelope. And the train. Between her shunting activities, and Mr. McHenry. And of course, Brian. It was obvious some coordinating had to be done, so Zebedee asked them all to explain their signs. Me first, said Brian. But Zebedee said he would leave it to Florence to choose the order, and would they please put their signs on the posts and explain. They agreed. Everyone should be given a fair hearing, said Zebedee, and they agreed again. Democracy, said Zebedee. Lovely, said Ermintrude. Penelope was to be first, and she explained her sign meant danger, spiders at work. Dillon was next. Your turn, Dillon, said Florence. Lazy thing, said Penelope tartly. Dillon's sign was no hooting, rabbits sleeping. Ermintrude was next. I wonder what it'll be, thought Florence. It was keep off the flowers. And then it was Dougal's turn. Oh dear, thought Florence. Keep cows off the flowers, said Dougal. Doesn't look a bit like me, said Ermintrude haughtily. Mr. McHenry's turn, said Florence quickly. And Mr. McHenry's sign meant, apparently, scooters only. Cheek, said the train. And when Florence asked for her sign, put up one which simply said, trains only. The twin birds were next. Crazy, said Dillon, for their sign meant music permitted. Florence had a look at the signs. Do you know, we might get a bit cluttered, she said. It'll be more cluttered when lightning gets here, said Dougal. Lightning was on his way. 1 mile per hour maximum speed, said Brian. Typical, said Dougal. Mr. Rusty was last. Flowers are best, he said. Oh, I agree, said Florence. Dogs are best, said Dougal's well-known fact. Well, dogs are all right, said Mr. Rusty. Except one. Watch where my eyes rest, said Brian. Zebedee asked if the signposting had gone well. All right, said Mr. Rusty, but I maintain there should be just one sign in the garden. Which one? Said Zebedee. This one, said Mr. Rusty. Mind. Dougal was waiting for Brian. Oh, come on, lightning. Hello. There's no time for pleasantries, said Dougal. You're late. We've got a lot to do, and you're late. If you were in a union, I'd sack you. Now, pull yourself together and concentrate on the working hand. Really, you're pathetic. I'm going home. Oh, dear. Now I've hurt his feelings. Oh, come back. I apologize. Humbly? Yes, humbly. Then I shall return, said Brian. Well, I'm glad we've sorted that out, said Dougal. And he and Brian got down to the work in hand, making a film. Brian was the camera carrier. Now hold it steady, said Dougal. Freeze. Brian froze, and Dougal went to look for his star actress. She arrived. Hello, Dougal, said Florence. Oh, I'm so excited. Me, a film star. Hello, Brian. I am a camera, said Brian. Now, are we all ready? Said Dougal. We must get started. Aye, aye, Antonioni, said Brian. This is going to be the greatest picture ever made, said Dougal, modestly. This will make Ben-Hur look like an advertisement for Turkish Delight. This will make Ken Russell spit with jealousy. Take one. And Dougal started to make his epic film. He consulted his script. He chose the best locations. What was it to be? Treasure Island, in Dougal vision. Florence acted her first scene, and Dylan arrived. I hear you're making a film, he said. I'm trying to, said Dougal patiently, but you've just walked in and ruined the first scene. Well, I don't want to worry you, said Dylan, but look. Indians? I didn't order Indians. Come out, said Florence. Wasn't I good? Said Ermintrude, appearing. Oh, joy, joy! I'm a film star! A film star! Dougal sighed. I wonder if this ever happened to Eisenstein, he thought. Let's get on then, said Brian. Right, said Dougal. Underwater, close-up of shark. What? Shrieked Brian. Come back, you coward! I'm a film star! Film star! Camera! Shouted Dougal. I'm not filming no sharks, said Brian. Oh, all right, said Dougal. We'll have some man-eating butterflies instead. Really? Really? Hello? Where's my leading lady? I'm here, shouted Florence, and I've found the treasure. How exciting, breathed Florence. Captain Cook's treasure. Now, wait a minute, said Dougal. Wait a minute. What's the use of doing the treasure scene without the camera? Really? Why does everyone have to be so stupid? Knew that would happen, said Florence. I knew that would happen, said Dougal. What's in there, Dougal? Said Florence. Treasure, said Dougal. It was a large lump of sugar, and I'll trouble you all to keep your thieving hands off it. Zebedee arrived. Any room in your film for a little one? He asked. I've gone off the whole idea, said Dougal. I think I'll go to the pictures instead.